Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Every week, bringing us a guest who can help us with our business communication. Today, we have a terrific guest. Geary is a veteran of television. I've watched her many times, first on CNN Headline News, and then for 19 years on Atlanta's WSB-TV. Laurie describes herself this way. First and foremost, this comes from her website, I'm a storyteller. I've spent 25 years in front of the camera, most of the time covering politics and winning awards from Emmys to Tellys. The Washington Post named me one of the best state political reporters. Very fittingly, Laurie's company, Geary Media, helps clients with video production, media training, media consulting, and with our topic today, crisis communications. With that background, please join me in welcoming Laurie Geary. Hello, Laurie.
Hello, Bill. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a wonderful privilege to bring you to the Biz Communication Show. Laurie, your company deals considerably with crisis communication. There's a question that I'm sure you hear from prospective clients, and I would like to know your answer to that, and I know our listeners would too. Let's say that you are talking to someone, a business person, and this company owner says to you, well, Laurie, I guess you've got a good service, but we really don't need any crisis communication training. Why? We've got the best safety record anybody could have. We've got clean living employees. We don't expect the media to be coming to us for any reason. I'm sure you've heard that, Laurie. What's your answer to that?
I have heard that, Bill, quite a bit, but my advice to that business owner, that CEO, is that if you have one employee, if you have a business, if you have 2 employees to 1 million, you need a crisis communications plan because you never know what will happen. You may have the most upstanding employees, but all it takes is one accident, and it's tied back to your business. And so I think the best piece of advice that I give to my clients is that have a crisis communications plan before you have the crisis. Make sure you have a plan, make sure you practice it, you study it. You don't just put it in a book or put it in a binder and let it collect dust. I mean, this is an ongoing training that you must have. Especially now, Bill, in this world of, we're more 24-hour news than we were 5 years ago with social media. And so it's instantaneous. If something happens at your place of business, at your organization, if you're in the nonprofit world, you need a communications plan.
Yes, and one way I like to think about it is I also would add to that person, have you read the paper today? Have you looked at the television news? Have you heard news on the radio? And do you think those people knew that a crisis was coming today? They were all unaware of that. In fact, the reason we call something accidents is that nobody planned it. Obviously, you wouldn't plan something like that. Now, you mentioned something that I believe we want to segue into next, and that is, what do you do before a crisis to be ready for it? I would sort of compare that to a person who has a dental appointment tomorrow for the first time in 6 months, and so they start flossing tonight. Well, that's not very effective. You have to have a consistent plan that everybody in the organization is familiar with. What would be 2 or 3 of the essential steps, Laurie, to be prepared for that crisis which comes on so suddenly and without an announcement?
I think there's a lot more than 2 or 3, but I will try to keep it brief. And I love the fact, Bill, that my phone is honestly ringing off the hook when it comes to crisis communications, because that means that folks want to be prepared, that organizations get it. My first piece of advice is to have a team in place and call this your go team, your crisis communications go team. And it should encompass your business leaders, but also attorneys if you have company attorneys. One of the most important people that you will pick on this team is somebody who will communicate with the media. make sure this person is camera ready, make sure they know how to answer questions, whether it's broadcast TV, whether it's radio, whether it's print, and just know that print reporters will go into much more detail than sometimes than a broadcast TV reporter because of deadlines. And make sure that you have everybody on that crisis communication go team on a group text, a group email. Make sure they know who they are. Make sure you update them every 6 months because people are in and out of businesses these days. And I would say that if once you have that team in place, you have to go through scenarios and you have to really put them through kind of quote the fire. One thing I've found with my business is that I can sit up there and I can talk about crisis communication and tell you what to do and how to do it. But until you actually go through it, and in my business, we bring in the camera team. I put my reporter hat on. We have a messenger who can message and we go through it. And from the beginning to the end, the people are just astounded at how much they improve. And it's really just because of practice. And I'm throwing out questions at them that they would never even think about. But because I've been there, I've been a reporter, they know how to handle them. And we get them through the messaging process. It's really important to practice. You can have a plan in place, but if you don't practice it, your people may not know how to actually execute it. The other part of this is the social media presence. You have to have somebody who will respond to social media instantaneously, because in a crisis, you want to be able to control that crisis and the communication that's going out from that crisis. And you're going to have a lot of people on their private pages posting things and innuendos and rumors, but you want to bring them into your space so that you can control that message. It's an invaluable tool to get your message out on your terms. So I think a lot of times we forget about that, but also really have somebody who will answer the phone at your place of business, who can talk to the media. So you might have a spokesperson on camera, but you might need somebody who will answer media calls to say, this is what's happening. We'll be having a press conference at such and such time. Even being able to handle media phone calls is kind of a gift that you need to train for as well.
It's interesting that you bring up the social media, because 20 years ago, that would not have been a component. We could have trained people in camera presence and what to say and what not to say. But as you and I know, and as everyone knows who's familiar with the social media, there are so many people who get their messages, their information, their news that way, and may not even be watching the regular media that we relied on so long before that. What you're saying is we really need a dress rehearsal and full action, not just on paper, right?
Right.
Now, it occurs to me that one problem that some organizations have, you mentioned that it needs to be someone who's very articulate. It needs to be someone who can represent the case very well, and that's understandable. There's so many organizations I've seen who think, well, that's for our PR person, or that's for our marketing person. And the entire time, nobody in the public is seeing or hearing from the CEO. What's your reaction to that, and what's your advice about it?
In my opinion, I think that nobody can tell your story better than your CEO. Nobody knows your passion, your mission, your employees better than your CEO. If your CEO is not the most personable person on camera, get them trained. Because the camera training will not only help them in responding to a crisis situation, but it's going to help them in public speaking. It's going to help them speak to the employees. And I remember, Bill, 20 years ago when I was at WSB, and it was really one of the first data breaches that really kind of happened in Metro Atlanta. So it was a really big story. And this company put out their spokesperson, put out all of their vice presidents, but we never heard from the CEO. And I think it mattered. When you hear from the top leadership, they have the ability to calm a situation. And they have the ability to get that message out that says, we are aware of this situation. We are very sorry. Genuine, got to be genuine. You got to be passionate. We're very sorry. But here's the action that we're taking. And if you have those 3 steps, you acknowledge the situation. You're very sorry for what happened. and your plan of action to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think the best person to give that to you is your top manager, your CEO, your president, whoever that may be.
Otherwise, it looks like they're hiding.
Right. And that's the last thing that you want in a crisis.
One of the questions that could come up in a calamity would be, tell us the exact details. For example, okay, you've had a fire here. What do you estimate is the amount of the damage? Or maybe you've had some injuries and fatalities. Well, tell us how many and who. To what extent should we answer those questions immediately? And if we don't answer them immediately, how do we delay answering them?
This is a question that I get so often because you only know so much. The event may have happened or the crisis may have happened on your property, but you still don't know all of the details. What I tell my clients, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, you know what, I don't know that right now, but I will get you that information as soon as possible. And it's really important in this scenario to make the media feel like you are working for them, that you are working to get that information across. Because if the reporter feels that, then the person viewing this will feel that as well. The general public will feel that, you're working to get them the most complete information, the most accurate information as possible. I mean, the worst thing you could do in a horrible crisis is to give the wrong number of fatalities or the wrong number of injuries. Reporters really want the facts. And there might be times where you have to defer to the authorities on some questions like that. And it's okay to say, you know what, we don't know the answer to that. We've turned that over to the police, to the firemen, and you can get that from the fire department or the police department. It's okay. I think the bottom line is it's okay to say, I don't know, if you really don't know. It's okay to be honest. I mean, I think everybody realizes that whether you're the spokesperson for a company, whether you're the CEO, you're also human.
I would think that during your years in the media, that you had a special respect for organizations that would come to you when a crisis happened instead of waiting until you came to them, because that shows an openness. It shows a readiness to tell the story. Would you agree on that?
I agree. I tell my clients the best advice I can give my clients is really to develop a rapport with members of the media before that crisis happens or before something bad happens to your company, because it's a sense of trust, right? If you can develop some trust and pick a reporter. I mean, if it's somebody that you watch on the news or it's somebody that you've read their byline or somebody that you follow on blogs, pick a couple of people, and whether it's your spokesperson, whether you have time as a CEO to reach out to the media. I know a lot of people don't, but you have to develop some type of relationship so that you trust the reporter, so that when something really bad happens, you know where to go and you know that you will be treated fairly.
One of the most important points that I think we need your guidelines on, Laurie, would be this. There are many interviews in a critical situation where a company's problems have gone public, where the spokesperson will be asked a question and will say, no comment. Tell us, what do you advise your clients about that?
The two most dreaded words, I think, as a reporter, a couple of things come to mind. And I just saw this happen 3 weeks ago. And this is kind of PR 101, right, Bill? Where we saw kind of get out of my face. Keep control of the situation. Do not get angry. Do not engage. Keep calm, okay? They might be coming at you with an ambush. You might be in the middle of a press conference. The reporters might be trying to push you a little bit. Try to remain calm and don't get angry, because let me tell you something. I've had so many stories that were a B block or a C block story because they were down far on the show. They were maybe at 6:15, 6:20, but they became the lead story because of the reaction that I got from the person I was interviewing or the person I had to ambush. I didn't do a lot of ambush interviews in my day, but because that no comment, that pushing the camera out, that walking away or running away from me, not only becomes something in the 6 o'clock story, it becomes the tease on social media. So my managers would take that 7 seconds of the no comment or pushing the camera out of the way. That's on social media. It becomes a promotion before the 6 o'clock news to get people to watch, because everybody is so accustomed to that no comment reaction. They want to see what the story's about. Because in all honesty, Bill, it means you're hiding something. It means that it either means you're hiding something or you don't have control of the situation.
Very, very much so.
Now, let me tell you real quick, I will tell you how to handle it. It's okay to say this, but you have to follow up. It's okay to say to the reporter, you know what? I don't know all of the information at the time that you're asking me, but once you tell me what the story is, the facts that you have, I would be more than happy to either sit down and talk with you or issue a statement. And if you say that on camera, it's less likely that they're going to use that, especially if you follow up with them and give them the interview on your terms, in your office, in a controlled environment, with your PR person, with your right-hand person, with your attorney there. Make it on your terms. You can control that interview, but if you tick off the reporter, we're human. We're going to say, okay, fine, like that's what you get. So and you can control that situation even if you are ambushed. I will get back to you, but you have to get back to them.
Yes, that's the key. If you say, I will get the information for you, you need to. Now, getting back again for just a couple of seconds to what I said about not giving details, I've thought of a couple of the dangers in that. For example, let's say there was a fire and a reporter comes and says, what's the extent of the damage? And the business owner says, well, gosh, about 500,000. Guess what? He's not, the insurance companies are going to hold the person to that. So anytime you give specific information, you'd better be accurate. And I'm remembering as we talk, Laurie, where we talk about you might not have all the information at once. I heard yesterday, as I'm sure you did on the news, that they have just now come to a conclusion about how many people lost their lives in the hurricane in Puerto Rico. There were estimates, but now they have an exact count, and that's many months ago.
Right. Follow-up is very important too. I wanted to talk about something that you had mentioned about accurate information. The other thing is, if you have information that you know and the media is asking you about it and you just don't want to release it, you might as well go ahead and release it, because they're going to find out anyhow. You might think that your employees are not going to talk to the media, but you would be surprised at all of the whistleblowers who called me, and you would be surprised who they were, who they had access to. I sat right next to Richard Belcher at WSB, who's our whistleblower investigator. And I mean, the people who would call him, you just never know who the whistleblowers will be in your organization. So the information will get out, and better for it to come out from you than somebody else.
And I get back because I think this is important, where you're training your team and we're talking about who's speaking for the organization. It needs to be clear also who is not speaking for the organization. That person you talked about, somebody answering the phone, if you don't have a person who's trained to say the right thing, to get them to the people that should be talking, you might have somebody answer the phone and say, yeah, we really have got a tragedy here. We got a heck of a mess. Our company could close. I mean, by impulse, if they're not trained, somebody could say that. So you mentioned a team effort. Everybody has to know who's in charge and who are the spokespeople, right?
That's right. And I would say have two people who are spokespeople, because you never know when your crisis hits. And I think, Bill, you went through this. That spokesperson might be gone for that weekend, yes, or that day, or might be out sick.
Yes.
So I would definitely have at least two people who can speak to the media. And I also, if the media is going to be coming to your organization, to your company, because they have to cover a fire or something, also make sure that you have kind of your command post in place for your team, but also then have a command post in place for where your media is going to congregate. And you want to make sure that they're separate enough that the media is not going to be hearing. And even little things, Bill, like if you have to always escort members of the media. But if you have to escort a member of the media to the restroom or somewhere, make sure that they're not passing that crisis communications room so they're not overhearing things that you're discussing.
This has been such terrific information. We have time for only one more question, and believe me, we're going to invite you back again. You're a tremendous resource. You're giving guidelines that every corporation, large or small, needs. The other question that I want to squeeze in here is, let's say, Laurie, that you're interviewing me.
Okay.
And I'm in a crisis situation. And you say, now, Bill, you can say whatever you want to about this. This is off the record. What's the fact on that?
Okay, so a lot of crisis communication agencies will tell you never, ever go off the record with a reporter. I beg to differ there because I was the reporter, right? And this is where it comes to establishing that trust, that relationship with that reporter beforehand. We have some of the best reporters in the country in this market, whether it's Richard Belcher, Mark Winnie, Dale Russell, Randy Travis. These are some of the most trusted people in the industry. And so if you have a relationship with these reporters, you can say, hey, look, this is off the record. And this is what would happen to me so many times. This is off the record. Tell them the background. It might just give the reporter some background on why you can't go on the record with them, right? So you go off the record with them. You say, okay, now I'm ready to go on the record. And you give them whatever information you can. There is one more phrase that we like to use in journalism, and it's on background. And I think we've seen this is where CNN is getting a little bit burned right now with Lanny Davis. As a reporter, I would never have a source go on background with me and then be my same source in the story that can go on the record. Just ethically, it just didn't jive. So I think when you go on background, it means that you can be what you're saying can be used in the story, but it can't be attributed to you. So you might be a high-ranking public official or a spokesperson, or just, I will never name you in that story, but that's where you really have to be careful, where you differentiate the difference between on background, on the record, and off the record. And you make sure, I mean, there are some reporters may have different definitions of off the record. I'm old school, Bill. You mentioned I'm a veteran. So, I mean, some reporters might say, oh, that's off the record. Well, I can use the information, I just can't attribute it. No. If it's on background, you can do that. But if it's off the record, you cannot report it. But it's all about establishing the relationships with the reporters.
Laurie, anybody who has any need to know something about crisis communication should come to you and your company. Tell us, please, what your contact information is for those who would like to follow up with you.
Oh, thanks, Bill. So I'm at LoriGearyMedia.com. That's LORIGEARY media.com. You can email me at Lori@LoriGearyMedia.com. And it's been so fun, Bill, to be on this side of the camera, because a lot of what I'm doing is training people for even their internal communications, because I think everything now is video, right? If you're doing a newsletter, you're probably doing a video newsletter so that people just aren't clicking on an email and clicking off. They're watching you. They want to see your message. So it has just been so fun for me to be on this side and to help people get comfortable in front of the camera.
I agree about video. There was a time when I started as an entrepreneur in 1997 when print was pretty much what you did to tell your story. And then we added audio to that, and audio became fairly accessible and easy. When video training first came in for entrepreneurs, it was quite complex. I remember attending a 1.5-day workshop in Atlanta to learn how to do it. But now video training, people can learn to produce their own videos cost effectively. And even if you're not a technology aficionado, you can still learn it. Thank God for the age of video. I agree with you. Well, Laurie, now that you've given your contact information, I'll give mine. Biz Communication Guys. So logically, my website is B-I-Z, bizcommunicationguide.com. Invite you to visit my website, sign up for my online newsletter, and look at the services that I provide for corporations and business leaders. Once again, Laurie Geary, terrific to have this conversation with you and to get your great guidelines, strategies, tips, how to and how not to for crisis communication. Any closing thoughts for us?
I think the most important piece we started with was that have a crisis communications plan in place before the crisis hits, and make sure you practice. Make sure you go through real life scenarios to make sure that your team is prepared. And
I'll add,
hope that
yes,
you never have to use it.
Yes, and I'll add, make sure you have an expert to take you through that. Don't try to wing it on your own. The experts can save you much grief, many dollars, and your reputation as well. And Laurie Geary is one of the great experts in crisis communication.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for all of you who joined us today. Be with us again next week for another segment of the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton.